Look at what Professor Cretney of Oxford University says. He says that as English laws are progressing and moving forward and advancing and becoming more and more realistic to the needs of people, to the natural state of the people they're supposed to govern, they are becoming more closer to Islamic law. So, whereas before you had very strict and rigid divorce laws which were connected with Christianity, now with the advent of not just secularism, but really the natural state of man, you've got laws that are becoming more closer to Islamic law. So, really, it's not such a phobia that society should have about Islamic laws. The reality is that people have just built up these crude oppositions, and media plays upon this sensationalization of Sharia law, and it's just a hot bubble. There is no reality behind it, and the bottom line is that in advocating for this, my words, Bishop's words, transformative accommodation, my words give people choices. Now, it's been said that what Sharia courts does is it actually subjugates the rights of women. Nonsense. Absolute humbug. The reality is that some of these Sharia councils were created to give women the right to walk away from marriages which they were stuck in for decades, so that they can walk away from them with some kind of certainty and a definitive cut from the past, away from, and men are very clever in trying to say, well, I'll walk away but I'll keep you stuck there. Some of these Sharia councils evolved to give women those rights and those liberties. One of the things that we've been looking at in the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal, and I'll give you that as an example in question. We've been talking to the Crown Prosecution Service in the case of domestic violence, for example, where a woman has been beaten up by a man. Obviously, next stage, police gets involved. Next stage, police ask for statements. Next stage, court. Obviously, there's been an ABH or perhaps even GBH. God knows how far the man got. Next stage, woman withdraws a statement. I'm sorry, I got the black eye because I fell down the stairs. Can't proceed anymore. CPS, oh, we know what's happened. She's been coerced. She's been forced. She's been pressurized into not moving forward. But what is the reality for that woman? She's actually taken a practical decision. She goes through with this issue of domestic violence, certain divorce, certain ostracization from the community that she wants to belong to and has a right to be with. So she says, well, at the end of the day, there's only a black eye. I'll live with it. Now CPS and the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal have entered into a long conversation, and we're still negotiating at the moment, wherein we would say that let the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal be charged with the issue of looking at the domestic violence of this woman. Now we know how we can apply a little bit of community pressure. This is where you give the woman the right to make that choice. Now she can go to CPS, have a case heard in court, husband in prison, community in isolation, and a certain divorce. But you've given her a choice to come to the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal, and a Muslim judge sits there and he asks her the question. Now, it's not just a question of, oh, this is an English court, now it's a matter of respect within the community. So the man, he turns up, and if he doesn't, other members of the community are brought, and they are told that this is the kind of thing that's happening. And, in a sense, there is not mediation, but the man is, his knuckles are tapped a little bit. Don't you do that again? And, some kind of social reprimand is given by the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal. The man is deeply embarrassed, but there is a sense of cajoling that takes place which brings the woman back with the man again. So quite clearly, there is a case to be had for even the extreme circumstances like domestic violence, in which the Muslim courts can play a very practical role. I will just conclude and I'll say this, that obviously there's a lot to be said about the functionality of Muslim courts in this country, but one thing is for sure, no one's advocating for the stoning of people, for the hanging of people, for the death penalty on the basis of Islamic Sharia law. But I will say this, I do not walk away from that, because the application of the mind of Allah has to be the greatest vindication for man to be governed by the mind of Allah. But the truth is, you can't govern with the mind of Allah to a society like we are today. We have no connection with Allah. So how can we be governed by His laws? We have to educate ourselves, we have to sophisticate ourselves, we have to advance ourselves as a society before we can be governed by His laws. And I think that's where we need to get to before we really start asking for a true pluralistic legal system. We are far from that. We're just offering choices. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.